Study or if you have to define what genetics is, so it is defined as the study of the genes or the genetic variations and heredity in an organisms. So we all know that we are made up of genes, right? So genes are basically uh, made up of deoxyribonucleic acids, and deoxyribonucleic acids, we know that they are basically the nucleotides with the nitrogen base and the deoxyribose, and they joined into a phosphodiester bond, which we will talk some time later on, the structure of DNA and others. But right now, should know that the genes, when we are saying it is the DNA and the letters which defines the lives as A, T, G, C. Now, as a human being, if we talk about, there are roughly 22,000 genes. Okay, that's how we have already sequenced this, or the scientists have already sequenced these things. And these genes are present on the chromosomes. Okay, so this type of the chromosomes which we talk about, or maybe you probably know or seen in a textbooks types of definition, the chromosomes has been shown like this. This is the centromere, and the genes are basically present as a sequence of the DNA of this chromosome. The chromosomes as such is present in the nucleus in all the eukaryotic organisms. If I have to take an example of a human being, we have got 46 chromosomes in our body, or you can say there are 23 pairs. Out of these 23 pairs of the chromosomes, we can say that 22 pairs, we call them as autosomes, or in some places you will also find they're also called as the allosomes. Okay, and then one pair is called as the sex chromosome. Now this pair of the chromosomes is having the XX, which defines as a female, and X and Y, which defines as a male. This is the symbols which we use for males and the females. Now, uh, most of the times, you might have heard that this child is having similarities or having eye color similar to his mother, or this girl child is having the complexion similar to her grandparents or a grandmother from paternal grandmother. You often see these things into consideration, right? And this is the discussions which is going not from this time, but it is from a prehistoric times. People knew about these types of discussions. So genetics is, if you have to define, is also called as a structure and function of the genes. And when we say that it is passed on from father and mother to their offsprings, okay, or their children's, this type of definitions, which we called as a transmission genetics. Okay, this is called as a transmission genetics. There are several branches of the genetics which is been defined. You probably, like just I mentioned, is a transmission genetics. You probably also heard of the population genetics. You also heard about the molecular genetics. And in this lecture series, I'm going to talk about all of this, that is transmission, population, molecular genetics, and another things which you also find, that is a quantitative genetics. But this is something for a basic genetics course. We will skip that. Maybe in some other lectures I will define. So you also heard about something which is called as alleles. So we will see that definition in a moment. But before that, I would like to tell you that what are the questions a genetics basically asks. A genetics asks this question: is a trait inherited? Means it has been transferred from one generation to the another. How is this genetic trait is inherited? How are the genes transmitted from one generation to another generation? How do genes recombine? What are the specific location of these genes on the genome? Now, the question arises if, say, suppose is someone who is having a black eye color and then uh, he is been married to a woman who is having a blue eye color. So, a genetics wants to know what will be the daughters or what will be the son's eye color will be there. By the way, eye color in human beings is a polygenic inheritance. It is not so simple to understand, and maybe in our advanced lecture or the other lecture series, I will define that. Okay, or in a simple way, when we have to define, let's say a plant which is a tall and in length, and it is been cross-pollinated with another plant which is a dwarf in length. Now, what will be the progenies, whether it will be a tall plant, whether it will be a dwarf plant, or whether it will be a mixture of tall and dwarf plant? These types of a questions a genetics ask. So, is it this trait is inherited? How this has been inherited? Now, we know that this has been passed on from the chromosomes. Okay, this is passed on from the chromosome. Like for example, I received 23 chromosomes from my father's sides and 23 chromosomes from the mother, and this is applicable to all the human beings which we are talking. Okay, and I received 22 autosomes from my father plus a Y chromosome from my father, and as well as 22 chromosomes from my mother and X chromosome, and that's why it defines me as an X and Y, and it is applicable to anybody else. Now, I'm being married. I will also transfer this chromosomes to my progeny, and I have fortunately one daughter and one boy. Now, I pass down all my 22 chromosomes to my daughter plus the X chromosomes, and similarly 22 chromosomes to my son plus the Y chromosome. Now, you can see the difference here. As a male individual, they have two types of chromosomes, that is X and Y. Okay, and similarly, this is not my alone contribution. My wife, she also transferred the 22 chromosomes and the X chromosome to my daughter over here. And she also transferred 22 chromosome and X chromosomes to the son over there. Now, this actually uh, brings to a particular very interesting question over here, that the sexes are determined by the males. It is not by the females. Okay, in some of the society, you do find that that they put the blames to the female side, that they bear the children's, and that children is based on the female side, but in fact it is the contribution of the sperm which is carrying either X chromosomes or Y chromosomes to the next generation. Okay, and they determine the sexes of a children's over there. Now, there is one another interesting thing which you see here, and it has been mentioned there, that how do genes recombine, right? So this gene recombination is something very remarkable phenomena which is taking place, and this phenomenon is called as a crossing over. Okay, and this is present in all of the eukaryotes, because I'm not an identical copy of my parents, or neither I am a mixture of my parents or from mothers or my fathers, though I'm saying or that anybody is receiving the 22 chromosomes from the mother and the father side, but there is a one event which actually differentiate them, and that event is called as a crossing over. Maybe in different lecture we'll talk about the crossing over detail, and what is the process of mitosis and what is the process of meiosis over there. Okay, so these are the questions which a genetics asks. Who coined the term genetics? The genetics terminology was coined by Betson, who is called as the father of the genetics. The father of the genetics is called as Gregor John Mendel, and based on this, it is also called as Mendelian genetics, as you can see here. And this Mendelian genetics, when we are referring, we are basically referring to the transmission of the characters from one generation to another generation. A whole lot discussions can be made for Gregor Mendel, that who he was. He was an Austrian monk. If he is a monk, then how he became a scientist. That's a kind of a discussion which need a particular different lecture, and probably I will talk about in some other time. But what is worth to mention that he was a genius. He actually presented his work into one of the national Natural Science Society at the Brno, as you can see here. And this work, it is, as you can see, is the original draft which has been shown. And he basically published his work, The Experiments in the Plant Hybridization. But unfortunately, his work was not recognized by the people at that time. So he is thinking ahead of his time over there. His work was rediscovered by three scientists who is working upon that. That is Hugo de Ferris, Carl Kohns, and Aaron Tushma. Okay. As you can see in this picture, there is a garden of Mendel where he basically worked upon. This is at present in Austria, is being shown over there. Now coming back to Mendelian genetics and who was Mendel, and you can see here he's a picture, and in the picture you can see he is dressed like a monk, but as part of a preaching, he also has a very strong interest in the science, and he basically studied or formulated his laws, and those laws at present is called as the laws of Mendel, or also some places you will find that it is referred as principles of genetics over there. Okay, so we will discuss this in our second lecture, that what are these principles. In nutshell, these principles is principle of segregation, and the second one is the principles of independent assortment. In some places, you might find that it is referred to as laws of genetics or laws of Mendelian genetics, and they refer to as three instead of two, and they basically considered that is defined as law of dominance into their consideration. So we will not fall into that debate that whether there should be three laws or whether it is two laws, but what is important, the concept should be clear, and that is what is the idea I am trying to present in this lecture series, which I will be uploading in my YouTube channel, and you can all can get benefit with this. Okay, so I will, because it is just an introductory slide or introductory lecture, and I just want to talk about that what is genetics, what is genes, what is chromosomes, what is a transmission genetics, who coined the terminology of the genetics, who is Gregor John Mendel, and in which particular model system he basically worked upon. He worked upon the garden pea, which is the Pisum sativum over here. Okay, so if you can see here is this picture of a Pisum sativum. It is one of the delicacies used in our food. We all cherish that, and he basically studied seven characteristics or seven characters for his study, and those is been mentioned here, and we will be discussing this in our next lecture. But essentially, which you can see in this picture is the seed coat color, which is gray versus white. There is a flower color, is a purple versus white. There is a height of the plant, the flower position, the pod shape, the seed color, the seed shape over there. So far, just to add up, we take this green pod color and the green seed color and the green smooth seed shapes. That's what we eat. What are these? Why these two things has been mentioned? Hopefully, I will come up with the next lecture and will describe that is what is the principles of Mendel's laws, and who how he basically come up to his conclusions. What is monohybrid cross? What is a dihybrid cross? What is back cross? What is the test cross? What is the definitions of alleles? What is genotype? What is phenotype? That you expect in my next lecture. With this, I would like to thank you uh, that for listening to me, and try to be safe in this pandemic time. That's what I can say, and that is one of the reasons that I basically used this platform, so that I can able to show you and make, that you can get benefited from this course. Okay, so thank you very much. So